Despite the reassurances and clarifications coming from the Trump administration following his plan for Gaza, with his administration saying that it will include the Palestinians leaving but returning at one point, then saying we won't be deploying for the army, and following that it's for the good of the people. Despite all of these clarifications and them trying to dial it down to an extent, the heat is still on behind the scenes. The main heat is happening between the United States and Egypt. There are multiple reports today, including one in the Times of Israel, saying that Egypt has launched a behind-the-scenes diplomatic blitz against the United States in Israel to try and prevent the plan of Donald Trump. What was that blitz, according to them? A threat that they will get rid of the peace treaty with Israel. There won't be any peace with Israel anymore. And the talks here are about Egypt playing, of course, a diplomatic role officially and publicly in front of everyone, but behind the scenes, and many sources are remaining anonymous when it comes to this, of course, because they don't want their identities revealed. They're applying pressure and taking the threat seriously. Egypt views this as a national threat to Egypt. They know what's planned for them. They know that what the Israelis want is Sinai, is Egyptian territories, not only expelling the population of Gaza. Despite Donald Trump trying to reassure these countries and telling them, okay, well, let the Palestinian people go. If not to your countries, to another country. Talks about Morocco, now Saudi Arabia, which I will get to in a minute, Malaysia, Indonesia, all of these countries. The people don't want to leave. But Egypt is viewing this as a threat, and now they are putting the peace treaty with Israel, the main thing, the cornerstone of stability in the region, at risk with the threats. When it comes to actions on the ground, Egypt, according to many Israeli officials, they breached everything when it comes to the peace treaty with Israel that considers the Sinai Peninsula a place that should be demilitarized. Egypt has over 100,000 troops. Egypt has heavy equipment. They have tanks next to the borders with Gaza. So having the threat of getting rid of the peace treaty altogether, or not having any sort of peace with Israel, no relation, that puts Israel as a state that can potentially and easily become an enemy. When you are not having a peace treaty with a country, that means you're at war with them. A war on low heat, a war with a ceasefire, a war that's quiet. That's the situation. That's what it was like before the peace treaty, before the Camp David Accords. So Egypt putting this on the table is not only a threat to Israel and to the United States and a use as leverage, it's an actual threat of war. Egypt, by saying that we're going to withdraw if this continues, or this would be at risk, that means we can go to war with them over this if this attempt is imposed on us. This is a very important development. And this is nothing strange from Egypt, by the way. Egypt plays a very diplomatic role, but behind the scenes, they take actions on the ground that are measured and that come at odds with the United States administration and with Israel. The biggest pressure that was applied on Egypt, funny enough, it was during the Biden administration, when it wasn't only the United States, but also other Western countries trying to apply pressure on Egypt to open the borders and get the Palestinians out so that Israel can have an easy way to ethnically cleanse the people, settle in Gaza, and the gas exploration and energy projects can go ahead and move on swiftly. Benjamin Netanyahu, just 2 weeks after the 7th of October, handed gas exploration contracts to multinational companies. Why did he do that when his country was busy in the biggest threat in its history? He did that because he has a plan, and Donald Trump now is part of that plan, and now he's talking about it as if it's some sort of a development site. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are, and what kind of arrogant and inhumane approach is that? Looking at Gaza as a state property. The level of arrogance of these people is beyond imagination. Which leads me to the second point that I wanted to talk to you about. The supreme leader of Iran, he had a statement in a speech in front of the parts of the Iranian army, including the Air Force. During which he said that negotiations with the United States, that's something that doesn't work. The focus of these discussions is negotiations with the United States, and they speak of negotiations as if they are a good thing, he said, but we've had experience with them, according to him. And it's not honorable to speak with them because we've tried them, we had concessions, we had friendly talks with them, we spoke for 2 years with them up until we reached an agreement, and we had some concessions in. But even then, they did not respect this agreement. And then they officially withdrew from the nuclear agreement. Why should we enter another negotiation round with them? The Supreme Leader is sending a message that might not be completely aligned with the political leadership of Iran, who are also looking to solve the problems that they have with the United States and with other countries too. However, they are very significant because the Supreme Leader is the main figure in Iran. And the show of strength that we saw from Iran the past few days with their revelation of the new underground coastal city that is primarily focused on targeting ships with land-to-sea missiles, and their revelation of the Etimad missile with the president himself attending there. All of these things are messages to the United States and of course to Israel. And the fact that the Iranian president Masoud Pezeshkian was present during some of these rounds is also sending a message that the political leadership is aligned at the end of the day, no matter how many disagreements they might have here and there about the shape or the way things could be conducted or carried out politically. From an Iranian perspective, the authority ultimately lies with the Supreme Leader. However, there is a level of leniency when it comes to politicians. There are those who are favorites when it comes to the Supreme Leader in terms of candidates for the presidency to run the country. There are others who are not. But there is that level of dynamics. But even with that dynamic that's happening in Iran, it's showing a strong front in the face of the United States and Israeli threats. And the United States, despite them trying to diffuse all of the tensions with Iran, and Donald Trump having statements such as, no, we'd rather reach a peaceful resolution with Iran. It's very far-fetched for Israel to have an attack on Iran. And even if we don't reach an agreement with Iran, that's fine as well. Despite all of these reassurances, apparently, Iran wouldn't be relying on that. And Iran does not trust any United States president, no matter what statements they make and no matter what agreements they reach with them. Moving on to the next point in connection to the displacement of the Palestinian people. Benjamin Netanyahu suggested that the Palestinians can have a state in Saudi Arabia. Why? You're thinking the man is trying to have a deal with Saudi Arabia. Why make such a statement, Benjamin Netanyahu? He made this statement during an interview he had with Channel 14, his favorite channel in Israel, that always claps and hails Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, even if it means doing a 180 every other week. These people were in favor of eliminating the Hamas, not having a ceasefire, constantly supporting all of this notion about total control in Gaza. And when Benjamin Netanyahu decided to have a ceasefire, all of a sudden it started to become the right thing to do. You know, we need to be realistic here. We can still attack them later on. We defeated them anyway. We killed everyone. Mouthpieces for Benjamin Netanyahu. So he has interviews with them. They don't really challenge him that much. But during that interview, he said, well, the Saudis can create a state for the Palestinians in Saudi Arabia. They have a lot of land there. He said it in a way that it was supposed to be as a question or a notion that his interviewer might have wanted to speak about. But the statement itself is a statement at the end of the day. So the man is trying to have a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, but claiming that they can send it there. It's not surprising from his perspective because he believes that Jordan is the state of the Palestinians. And he actually doesn't recognize the existence of a Palestinian people, despite the fact that they constantly talk about them. And now the suggestion of Saudi Arabia shows the true face of Israel, and even Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who actually wants to have a peace treaty with them. Now, what kind of message is that sending to the people who you want to have a peace treaty with? That's number one. So is it a stupid move from Benjamin Netanyahu, or is he now convinced that the Saudis are taking another path? Saudi Arabia made several statements. Of course, everything is statements at the end of the day, you know. It's your choice to believe it or not, but they did make statements to deny the fact that they accepted to have a peace treaty with Israel without the creation of a Palestinian state, despite Donald Trump mentioning that during his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. No, it's not a condition. He outright said to a question from one of the reporters who were asking him about it. Then they clarified, no, we will not be having a peace treaty with Israel if there is no Palestinian state. Who's lying? Who's lying? And is Benjamin Netanyahu annoyed over these statements coming from Saudi Arabia because he believes it's actually not that realistic? From what we can see, it could be a clear case of lack of strategy and lack of vision coming from Israel. Many people and many analysts overestimate what these people are capable of. The past 15 months show that they have no long-term vision. They have no strategy. They're bombing for the sake of bombing, destroying people's houses, making the people's lives miserable, committing a genocide, mass-scale terror. They're war criminals wanted by the ICC, and they're also committing a genocide. All of that without any vision for the future. They weren't thinking, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, they were not thinking genuinely about the long-lasting condition and situation of Israel, its security, its prosperity, its resilience on a long-term basis. Because all of these things would be achieved through politics on its own. By political actions being taken that would have to deal with the historical and contemporary rights of the Palestinian people. With or without concessions here and there, that's a separate story. But a deal has to be done. It has to be done. And they were not thinking along those lines. It was only bloodlust, venom. It showed their true image to the whole world about who they are and what they do, their essence, their ideology, the people who support them globally, and what they're about exactly. And that has now been confirmed by another report that was published by the Plus 972 magazine about senior officials in the Shabak and in the intelligence establishment inside of Israel confirming that Israel had no targets in many cases in Gaza. They were shooting aimlessly. They did not target locations based on specific information because in many cases they did not have that information. They deliberately targeted very densely populated areas with bunker busters, and the bunker buster effect with Israeli knowledge, it had a byproduct that released gases, carbon monoxide, in a range of hundreds of meters. Israel did that knowingly. According to the report, it was found out by the previous Israeli Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot during one of the attacks on a PIJ tunnel, 2018, that when they use a bunker buster, everyone gets killed because of the gases. So from that moment onwards, Israel started to capitalize on that to mass murder people. So in many cases in that article, in that publication, they said that Israel knew that this would be killing hundreds of people, and they used it deliberately, including the killing of 3 Israeli prisoners at the time held by the Palestinian resistance, so that Israel can kill Ahmad al-Ghandour, a senior figure in Al-Qassam brigades. And that wasn't the only time, by the way. And I spoke about the incident where one of the Israeli prisoners held by Hamas was killed in a tunnel deliberately. with the gases being released, and his mother knew about it as well, because they knew about it from the autopsy afterwards when some of the bodies were evacuated. So that is again a proof coming from the Shabak and the intelligence officers who were participating inside of Gaza about the fact that Israel has been shooting aimlessly, and they did not have direct knowledge about all of the places they want to target. All of that proves that they lack strategy, that they lack vision, and that their only aim was destruction and genocide against the innocent people, against the innocent civilians of Gaza. Which leads me to the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Trump is now imposing sanctions on the ICC. This is something, in my opinion, that is exceptionally good. It's actually amazing. Why? Because no one has to make an effort to prove the contempt of the United States for the international law. We no longer have to say, oh, the United States, they don't respect they are at war with international law. Because some people don't know what's labeled as the Hague Act, giving them the right, from the Bush administration times, giving them the right to go and invade the Hague in case one of them or their allies is trialed for anything, any crime against humanity. Now with this move, Donald Trump is doing everyone a favor. Hello world, we're the United States of America. We have been telling you all about international law and human rights, and here we go. We're going absolutely against the international courts, the International Criminal Court, international humanitarian organizations, withdrawing from anything to do with human rights, opposing anything to do with human rights. That is the true reality of the United States. That's why it's good. Just like Benjamin Netanyahu exposed Israel in its true essence to the world, Donald Trump is exposing the United States in its true essence to the whole world, and therefore many people wouldn't have to talk about it too much because it's already public knowledge.